How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Review, CBB Reviews podcast. Resurrected after about, a year off now, Matt?
Yeah, it's been quite some time, but glad to be back, and definitely we're upgrading it.
Yeah, just talking to Matt. We're fellow students at Syracuse University. No bias here, of course. We're very impartial when it comes to college basketball and other sports. But we wanted to resurrect this because this is what we're all about, broadcast journalism. Wanting to bring you guys quality college basketball content, and we got a lot to cover. Hopefully this will become a consistent part of your life. It'll be posted on YouTube, and it's going to be great fun. My name is Brendon Hodges. If you don't know me, I don't write for the website, but I'm more of a guy who likes talking a lot, and Matt has learned that the hard way at some point. But we got a lot to talk about today, and really it all revolves around, obviously, we're in a pandemic right now, and we can't do a lot of the things that we want to be able to do in our daily lives. And that includes sports. We've seen high school sports across the nation affected, whether it's been through cancellations or just postponements of seasons from the fall to the spring, and maybe even spring to the summer. We don't know. And it's such a fluid situation that there's so many of these situations that will come up where teams will decide to cancel a game because of COVID reasons, or tell their players, you know what, the season's just off when it comes to maybe Division II, Division III basketball. But the big story coming out of college basketball this week came from one of the Blue Bloods, one of the bigger programs, one of the most recognizable faces in college basketball, and that's Mike Krzyzewski, who announced to Sports Illustrated that the non-conference games on Duke's schedule will not be played due to COVID concerns. Now, there's been speculation from media members that this may have to do with the fact that Duke's been losing. They lost to a very good Illinois team, and I stress they are very good, sixth in the nation, but also lost another game as well. So I have Mat Mlodzinski, founder of CBB Review, with me, fellow classmate, and we're going to talk about that. We got conference projections for you today. Some trivia. That's going to be a daily thing, and we can't wait to bring that to you. We'll see if Matt really knows as much about college basketball as he thinks he does. And then picks for this long weekend of college basketball that everybody can't wait to watch. There's a ton of sports to watch now, and we're happy they are. So we'll start off with the lead story. Again, Coach K announced Duke has canceled the remaining non-conference games. They only have 3 more to play, but they'll be going straight into conference play. They play Notre Dame on the 16th, and then they'll have a 2-week layoff before they go and head to Pittsburgh to start up their ACC schedule again. So, Matt, is this decision based upon COVID-19, or do you think it's based upon his team's poor play?
I think, you've seen this before with Coach K, where he's made comments in spite of a loss, and especially in this case, 2 losses where Duke, a top-ranked team, and they haven't looked really good, to be quite honest with you. And, it's kind of funny because you have a Gardner-Webb team that was supposed to be on Duke's schedule. They only lost by 2 to a really good Western Kentucky team. So then you almost have to take into consideration Coach K knows his opponents. He might have seen that as another team that could have really, given Duke a run for their money. I think it's a mix of both. I think that these coaches, a lot of them are upset, especially some of these bigger programs where they have freshmen that need more time to develop, especially going into the season. They haven't had the chance to do that. But again, you also look at losing 2 games right off the bat like that. Coach K can get frustrated quite easily, and I think it's a combination of both, but I won't say that he's necessarily wrong in saying it.
And why do you think he's not necessarily wrong? If you think about the other way around, yes, these freshmen need time to develop, but maybe 2 weeks of practice can help them develop better habits, whether it's practice habits or being able to build chemistry with a team on the court, practice-wise, and then kind of not babysitting them, but shepherding them through an easier stretch of ACC play, starting with the Notre Dame team that is down, and especially from a few years ago, and then a Pitt team that we really don't know what we're going to get from.
And I think that's a lot of it is I think that he sees those as 2 winnable games that can turn the team around. And not only that, but this is a year that non-conference play won't really be a huge determining factor in seeding, even who makes the tournament, as in past years. I mean, a lot of analysts have really said that as they look at this non-conference slate. Yes, if you get a really big win, it'll help you a little bit. But if you're losing some games in the non-conference slate, it's not going to be the end-all be-all because they understand what situation we're in. So I think Coach K sees it as, let's take a week off, let's regroup, and let's try to win these first 2 ACC games, get back up up to 500 and really try to turn things around.
Now, there's obviously another side to this as well when it comes to COVID. You've seen teams like a Richmond, for example, already have their season put on pause for a short period of time due to COVID protocols and positive tests. You've seen a couple of schools even stop their seasons, whether it's on the men's or women's basketball side. With the idea of like teams are scheduling games willy-nilly, whether it comes to collegiate football, collegiate basketball. This might not all just help Duke, because you never know how their schedule may be changed down the line, and they might have to go back to those teams to schedule a game late in the season just so they can get players extra experience if an ACC game falls through.
Yeah, and I think that conference play might be tougher than non-conference play for a lot of these teams, because most of the teams are trying to schedule other teams that are in the general area. I look at smaller conferences that are for conference play. I mean, Marist, the NEC, Marist played Binghamton, or excuse me, the MAAC, and the NEC, another one. The MAC has done it. There's a lot of these small conferences. Marist played Binghamton twice in a row. They did a home and home. And I think these small conferences are able to do that because all the teams are so localized with each other. You look at the ACC, Duke's playing Notre Dame and Pitt. Duke is nowhere near Notre Dame, and they're nowhere near Pitt. So travel could be an issue for these bigger conferences. I think if they can have travel partners, that'll be big. But they're going to have to get these conference games in some way, because at this point, I think the season's a full go. You're already pretty far into the season as far as a couple weeks. I know that might not seem like a lot, but I feel like in COVID rules, it is. Once you're already a couple weeks in, these teams are getting set. I think they're committed to finishing this season somehow, and they're going to need to come up with some way to do that for these bigger conferences. I don't really know how they're going to do it, but it's going to be interesting.
It will definitely be interesting to see just how the ACC plays out, being the premier conference for college basketball, but other conferences as well. And that brings us into our next topic. We'll leave Coach K and Duke behind for now because they get plenty of attention already. Conference projections, CBB review obviously put theirs out a little while ago. We're a bit behind the 8 ball on this sort of thing, but now that we've had a couple of games move forward, the ACC Big Ten Challenge and other teams mixing up in different tournaments, the Maui, or as Bill Walton liked to call it, the Asheville Invitational, along with the Bad Boy Mowers Invitational up in South Dakota. I have to ask you, Matt, we have 6 conferences on this list. The Power 6 really is what you could call it in college basketball. Most people just say it's the Power 5 and then the Big East. But if you had to rank these conferences 6-1, please, by all means, I think I would rank them Pac-12 6th, Big 12 5th. Then you have the SEC, the Big 10, the Big East, and the ACC in that order, 6-1. But I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I'm actually going to switch it up a lot on that. I think the Big Ten from top to bottom, I think, is by far the deepest conference. I think every team in the Big Ten can make the tournament. Again, I think in past years, I agree with you. I think the ACC, and I think maybe right now the ACC is a little bit young. So by the end of the year, the ACC might be that much better. But I think right now, for me, I have the Big Ten at 1. I've gone back and forth after that. After the Big Ten, it kind of destroyed the ACC and the Big Ten ACC Challenge. I'm kind of going between the ACC and the Big 12 in 2nd and 3rd right now. I have the Big East there too, but I think the Big East being a smaller conference this year, hurting them. I'm not sure yet about UConn. I think they're really, really good, but I just need to see them play against better competition. They had the big win against USC, so that was surely a bright point. So I think right now I'd have those 4 right there. I'm actually going to throw a wrench in this. I have the Pac-12 at 5, but then I have the Atlantic 10 above the SEC. I have not been impressed with the SEC at all. Now, I know the A-10 being a mid-major conference, but having Richmond there, Dayton's looked really good. St. Louis is a team that a lot of people think can make a run. And I look at the SEC, Kentucky has been really, really bad. Florida's looked good. You have LSU and Auburn both have losses to mid-major opponents. Liberty's 2-0 against the SEC this season. Mississippi State I could go either way with them. So I think right now the SEC to me is at the bottom. But again, this can all change in 2 weeks. You just never know what you're going to get. But right now, I think the Big Ten for me is the clear favorite.
Quick note on the A-10, by the way, growing up in St. Louis, I grew up with those Cody Ellis and Jordair Jet teams that had a lot of success going through the A-10 into the tournament. And along with them were Richmond and Dayton in the tournament as well. So you never know what you can get from a mid-major, especially some of the teams we're seeing pull some pretty big upsets as of late. Kansas State obviously losing to a Division II opponent recently. It's been a wild year in college basketball. But let's go through your conference projections here. And I think we both agree that Virginia is the team to beat despite a couple of setbacks here early in the season, especially with the transfer. One of the Hauser brothers from Marquette.
Yeah, and I know Louisville's looked good as well, but Virginia was, I'll shout him out, one of our writers, Sam Bass. He put the ACC preview together. He had Virginia at number 1. I got to go with Virginia as well. I just think right now they're not playing great. They obviously lost the game to San Francisco, a good San Francisco Dons team. But you see a Virginia team that their offense isn't clicking at the moment how it might be. And I think once it does, their defense is already playing just as good as it normally does, if not better. So I think once they get that all set in stone, I think Virginia might run away with the ACC, to be quite honest with you. I know that there's a long ways to go. Florida State's another team that's looked good, but I think we can agree that Virginia, even though they had that early loss, they've looked real good.
Let's talk about another ACC team real quick that struggled last year and was kind of now forgotten about those struggles because there was no NCAA tournament. North Carolina. They had a lot of injuries last year. Roy Williams, it was a season to forget. And I think thankfully for him, at least, because there was no tournament, people will probably forget. We won't, but that's just how it works. How do you see North Carolina stacking up amongst the big boys in the ACC?
Right now, I'm kind of going 50-50. I've seen a couple things with Carolina. Going into the Iowa game, I really called them out. I said, look, their guards have not been great. Their big men have not been as big as in the past. North Carolina they've been used to having some pretty big boys down there. Then Garrison Brooks had a pretty decent game. Caleb Love really impressed me against Iowa. So I see, okay, you know what? North Carolina might not have started out with the best. They struggled against College of Charleston, who isn't that great this year. But right now, after watching that Iowa game, Iowa's one of my favorites for the national title. North Carolina played them really, really tough. So I think that's definitely something to note going forward is maybe this UNC team, people aren't in love with them right now, but give them a little bit of time, and they do have a talent to turn it around.
Well, you mentioned Iowa. We'll move on to the Big Ten. You have Iowa as your pick to win not just the conference, as you just told us. And they have the focal point of their team. He's pretty hard to miss because he's a huge individual person, and he's huge on the score sheet, that being Luka Garza.
Yeah, Luka Garza, my favorite player in college basketball. I mean, he is just dominant. Our writer Ariel Putterman put together the Big Ten preview, and he had Illinois at number 1. Can't blame him for that. Illinois, again, to me, is another Final Four contender. He had Wisconsin at 2 and Iowa at 3. And now I know Wisconsin lost that early game to Marquette, but they looked really, really good against the good Rhode Island team. So, I've been hard on Wisconsin. They'll be in the top 4 of the Big Ten, I think, by the end of the year. But I can also see them slipping. When you talk about Iowa, they're my clear favorite just because, again, even though UNC played them well, Iowa played them that much better. I mean, they've got all these shooters. They brought back Luka Garza. It's a veteran team. I mean, all of these guys have been playing in the program for 3 or 4 years. So I look at an Iowa team that can shoot, they can get the ball inside, and they have veteran presence. And I think those are 3 things that you need to win a national championship, and especially in the tough Big Ten.
And we mentioned earlier the Big Ten, at least in your eyes, is the deepest conference just teams-wise. What's one dark horse team that you really think could shake things up later in the season, February into the early March when the conference tournaments come around?
Man, there's so many. I mean, Michigan, a team that's right outside the top 25. I think they're a team that will be inside the top 20 when it's all said and done. Rutgers is obviously already ranked, but they've looked, pretty good. They're still missing Geo Baker. He's a core of their offense. Minnesota is another team with Marcus Carr. He's one of the best scorers in all of college basketball. I mean, I could honestly go on and on. Again, I think that maybe with the exception of a Northwestern or a Nebraska, every single team in the Big Ten will be on the bubble or in the tournament once we go to March. I really think that.
That'll be interesting to see. We'll move on to the Big 12 now, and you have Kansas as your preseason pick. Who doesn't have Kansas as their preseason pick most years? But we've seen other teams perform. Baylor has been a mainstay in the top 25, at least the past 2 years. They lost only one starter, I believe, from that team last year, in Freddie Gillespie. If I'm wrong, please correct me on that. And then you have Texas coming off the win in the Maui Invitational, big buzzer beater from Matt Coleman. And they look to be threatening the Kansas as well. But what other team do you think could threaten the Jayhawks in Big 12 play?
Yeah, you mentioned them, and I think West Virginia is the other one that you've got to get a look at. I mean, West Virginia with Bob Huggins at the coach. To me, he's one of the best game planning coaches there is in college basketball. He can really throw out a game plan and really defend your team. I think this West Virginia team scores better than in some of the past years, and I think they're going to be a team that's right up there. I love Texas as well. Again, I have Kansas at number 1. Baylor was Ariel Putterman's number 1 team in the preseason. I know a lot of people like Baylor. They're top 10 in offense and defense. Currently, the only team in the country that can boast that. But I think when you look at a Big 12, you have those 4 teams, and then you have everyone else. I think Texas Tech will be there. I don't know if I'd put them in that top tier of the Big 12. And then you have Kansas State and some of the other teams, Iowa State, that to me just I don't see them winning many games this season, which is why when we looked at the conferences overall, I don't see the Big 12, at the top. But if you look at their top 4 or 5 teams, it's definitely very good, and it's going to be a race.
We'll move on to that 6th man in the Power 6 conferences here in college basketball, at least in terms of what people may think. The Big East and Villanova, the historic program, Jay Wright, one of the best coaches in the country, and it's your pick to win the Big East. And you mentioned UConn earlier, how you're really not sure what you got with them yet. And then the Big East schedule is really kind of short when it comes to conference games. So where do you see them stacking up when it comes time to decide who goes to the tournament in regards to just lack of games? Will they schedule more games?
Yeah, and I know the Big East is looking at the 20-game schedule. Now that they have UConn in the Big East, they can do that with each team playing each other twice. So that'll be big time if they can get that done. But Villanova and Creighton, I think, are ahead above the rest. I think they're also 2 Final Four contenders. I did the Big East projection, Seton Hall grad. I have to stay with my roots there. I had Villanova at number 1 and Creighton at 2. I still have that right now. I had Seton Hall at 3. I don't know if that's necessarily biased. I know Seton Hall was 5 in the Big East Conference projections, only a point or 2 behind UConn. Providence was 3. I'm not in love with Providence. I had them a little bit lower. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing right now. I mean, you've seen a UConn team that right now I'd probably have them at 3 after their win over USC. Seton Hall seems to be putting it together. Game against St. John's tonight. Seton Hall just beat a great Penn State team that is scoring the heck out of the ball. So I see a loaded conference, but obviously this year might not seem as loaded because you lose a Marcus Howard on Marquette. You lose a Miles Powell on Seton Hall. Some of these, 4-year guys that were All-Americans last season that aren't in the conference anymore. But there's still some really, really good players and a couple teams that can go pretty far in March.
We'll move on to the West Coast, and at times it seemed like the Pac-12, at least football-wise and maybe even basketball-wise, might not even have a season because of COVID restrictions in certain states, but they're going, and you have Oregon as your favorite, and I have a feeling I know what team you may pick to be a dark horse in this conference, certain academic and athletic power that has a tree as their mascot, perhaps.
You could. I might throw another wrench at you, a team that lost last night that I almost had as my number 1. It was Nick Musial's number 1. He did our Pac-12 preview, and that's Arizona State. Obviously, if you have a lot to talk about Stanford, you can throw that in there as well because Stanford's a very, very good team. But Arizona State, to me, with Josh Christopher, the freshman, with Remy Martin, who I think is one of the better seniors in college basketball, I just think this is an ASU team that they can score the basketball. So if they can defend, they're going to compete in this Pac-12, and they might not win it because Dana Altman is a fantastic coach in Oregon, but I think Arizona State has some of the best talent, in the Pac-12.
All right, I don't have anything to add about Stanford, by the way. I've watched them one time. I haven't had a chance to watch them since, but from what I saw, they were very good and very balanced as well. I think it was a close loss they had to Indiana in that same Maui Invitational. But yes, a very good team nonetheless. And finally, the conference that you're down on, at least right now, the SEC. You have Florida as your pick to win it right now. There are a couple other undefeated teams in the conference, but I think that'll change pretty quickly, and we'll cover that when the picks come around later in the show. But you have Florida right now. Why do you have them there?
Yeah, Florida, they just got a couple guys that I think right now Tennessee is a team that a lot of people liked. But when you look at Florida, I see more playmakers. Scotty Lewis, Trey Mann, Keontae Johnson's another guy. I just see this team having a couple more players than Tennessee, and I think it's going to be those two at the end. If Kentucky can turn it around, Coach Cal definitely has the talent on paper, but Florida has looked the best. They haven't lost yet. They have a big game with Florida State tomorrow at 11 a.m., so that'll be a game to watch because I think that'll really show a lot about, okay, is Florida State going to make the ACC better, and is Florida going to make the SEC better? Because both of those conferences need some team to step up, so that's going to be a really good game to watch.
Well, we'll have that as one of our pick segments as well. It would be about this time that we'd take a short break, but because we're pressed for time and we want to get this out to you guys as fast as possible, we're not going to do that. So we're going to go straight into our trivia segment, our three-point play. I got 3 questions for Matt. We'll see if he can get them right. I guarantee you he'll get at least 2 of these wrong. But here we go. We will start with question 1. Out of the ACC, this is probably the one that he has a better chance of getting right, by the way. Which charter member of the Atlantic Coast Conference won the very first ACC tournament in 1954? Your choices are A, North Carolina, B, Wake Forest, C, North Carolina State, or D, Maryland.
I'm sorry for the phone ringing in my background there. Can you just repeat the choices again?
Yes, A, North Carolina, B, Wake Forest, C, North Carolina State, and D, Maryland.
I might get this wrong. It was actually my choice before you gave me those choices, but I was going to go with North Carolina State.
You are correct, sir. Congratulations. 1 for 1 on the year. Keep a tally, folks. We'll see how Matt does by the end of the year. North Carolina State defeated, actually, Wake Forest, 82-80 in overtime to win that tournament. Wake Forest, Dickie Hemrick won that ACC tournament MVP despite playing on the losing team. Wake Forest actually had to go to overtime 3 times in that first tournament, in the quarterfinals, semis, and then in the finals. And as far as the charter members go, you have Clemson, Duke, Maryland, NC State, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Wake Forest. Question 2, out of the SEC. It's a true or false question. Charles Barkley recorded the first triple-double in the history of the Auburn Tigers. True or false?
Well, I would think that I just feel like this is a trick question. I would think that Barkley did, but I know that Auburn, I can't put my name on him. I know Auburn had another big old-timer back in the day. I don't know if this will be the guy, but I'll say false.
You are correct. It is false. However, it came a little more recently. Kenny Gabriel in 2012 versus Bethune-Cookman notched 24 points, 13 rebounds, and get this, 10 blocks to record the first triple-double in Auburn Tiger basketball history. And finally, question 3 out of the Big 12. Now, while being good at basketball is great, it's great for a school because you earn revenue off of that. Being good at a lot of different sports is even better. This Big 12 school found that out when it was named America's Best Sports College by Sports Illustrated in 2002. Your choices are A, Texas, B, Oklahoma, C, Kansas, and D, Missouri. Keep in mind these are Big 12 schools at the time. So I know Missouri is an SEC school, but at the time they were in the Big 12.
And this was in 2002, so it would be December 2002?
I believe so, yes.
I know you're from Missouri, so I feel like you might have put Missouri in there for that, but I got to go with my first guess. So I was going to go with Texas.
3 for 3, Mat Mlodzinski sweeping the trivia today. Yes, Texas beat out Stanford, Oklahoma, Florida, and South Carolina in SI's 2002 study of top sporting schools. And that was because the Longhorns were having great success in football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and baseball in 2001 and 2002. So 3 for 3, a good start for you.
Well, I have the reasoning there. I mean, I'm thinking, okay, Texas made the Final Four in 02-03, so they were probably good the year before. You know, obviously with their Rose Bowl appearance a couple years later, I figured their football program at that time was still good. You got to know the baseball. Texas has always been good in baseball. So,
well, 3 for 3 for Mat Mlodzinski. He's batting 1,000 through episode 1. That'll probably change next time out. But we'll close out the trivia for now and head on to the pick segment. And we have a very busy week of college basketball coming up. We got 10 games for you that Matt will be making a pick for. I'll make a pick too, but I'll probably be wrong with all of them because I don't know about college basketball as well as Matt does. I'm just here to be an on-air talent because that's what I'm kind of good at. But we'll start it off with the action coming up later this afternoon. First pick of the day features a Big East battle. Two teams looking to keep their winning streaks alive. The Red Storm of St. John's taking on Matt's alma mater, the Seton Hall Pirates. Now, Pirates are coming in as 4.5-point favorites despite a 3-3 record. And St. John's is 5-1, but those wins has come against the Power 5 opponent, that being Boston College. So, Matt, I have a feeling I know where you're going to go with this one because you're not one to put your biases to the background. But please, I'm going to pick Seton Hall just because their schedule has looked a lot better. They've taken losses to Oregon and Rhode Island, two teams who are usually pretty good in their own respective conferences. So I'll pick Seton Hall for this one.
Yeah, no, I'm going to take the Pirates. A shameless plug as well. I'm actually doing a halftime show for Seton Hall. We're going to be doing it for the season going forward, me and along with one of my co-hosts when I was at Seton Hall, Rich Behan. So just wanted to throw that out there. But it's also going to be a good game. Whenever these two teams play, it's always closer than some people expect. St. John's has upset the Pirates multiple times in the past couple of years. I'm wearing the Seton Hall St. John's shirt from last year where we did a college game day type thing for that game. But it's going to be a big game for both teams. Seton Hall wasn't originally supposed to play St. John's. It got rescheduled because of some of the COVID. It was supposed to be Seton Hall playing DePaul. But I've got the Pirates in this one. St. John's might give Seton Hall some trouble down low, but St. John's has struggled against teams like Rider and obviously their win over BC. BC's been playing a lot of tough competition, but they only have one win so far to show for it.
We'll move on to the next and final pick from the Friday slate tonight at 9:30. One of the storied basketball programs in the nation. It's one that's been in the middle of a downturn as of late. UCLA playing host to the Marquette Golden Eagles tonight on the Pac-12 Network, 9:30 Eastern Time. Check it out. Bruins are also 4.5-point favorites. That's the only trend we have in this pick segment because there are no other odds for any of the other games that I could find. And UCLA is in the middle of a ridiculous home stretch. 8 games consecutively at home for the Bruins. Marquette, meanwhile, has been great defensively this season. They haven't given up more than 70 points through their first 5 games. Do they keep that up tonight? And who wins the game, Matt? I will take – you know what? I'll take Marquette. If they're playing well defensively, travel, sure, it may have something to do with it. But UCLA, like I said, has been in a bit of a downturn the last couple of years. And I'll take Marquette with the upset.
There's a lot on the line here because our betting expert, Nick Musial, has UCLA with the line. So he better be right because I'm going to go with UCLA. I think either team can win this game. But, you know, I need to see more out of Marquette. I think that, you know, their win over Wisconsin, a lot of people might be, you know, saying, okay, the Golden Eagles might be back. They have DJ Carton, a transfer from Ohio State. They got the best recruit in this year's class in the Big East. But UCLA with Tiger Campbell, keep an eye on his name. He dishes out a lot of assists, one of the few power conference players that still does that. A lot of times you see the mid-major guys getting 6-7 assists a game. Tiger Campbell does that with the UCLA team. And for that's one of the reasons, but I got UCLA in a close one. Also, whoever wins this game is probably most likely going to be ranked, whether it's UCLA going back in the rankings or Marquette making an appearance there.
We'll move on to a game that could have another two teams in the rankings, one of which already is. It's Saturday action time, and it's a battle for supremacy in the Sunshine State on ESPN. Florida, 20th ranked Florida State. Both undefeated early in their respective seasons and both looking to contend during their conference seasons. The Seminoles coming off a nail-biter 69-67 overtime win over Indiana, while Florida's lone Power 5 win this year is against, guess who? Boston College. ESPN's Basketball Power Index gives the Gators just under a 60% chance to win this game. It's honestly a toss-up for me, but I think Florida State is the better team, the more experienced team, at least in my thoughts. I've seen plenty of guys go through there and just keeping up with them casually. It seems like they have a lot of the same guys year to year, and Leonard Hamilton is just a really good coach.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, Florida State, also one of the 10 biggest, tallest teams in college basketball. I bet Florida might struggle with that, especially playing a VC team that isn't overly tall. So for that being one of the reasons, I have Florida State. And again, shout out to Leonard Hamilton, guy that constantly goes under the radar, coaching in an ACC that has names such as Coach K, Jim Boeheim, Roy Williams, and more guys than just that. But Leonard Hamilton, a Coach of the Year candidate any year, honestly. He really has this Florida State program revitalized, and it'd be a big win for the ACC, and I think Florida State gets it done.
One of my favorite NCAA tournament games of all time, of course, Florida State versus Florida Gulf Coast. That was a very interesting game. A lot of tall men throwing stuff down in the first half. Florida State ended up pulling away late in the game, but a fun game nonetheless because it was Dunk City against at least 6 or 7 7-footers coming off the bench. Moving on to more Saturday action at noon. Well, Big Blue Nation has been surprised this year, not in a good way though. After their season-opening win against Morehead State, the Wildcats have dropped 3 straight to Richmond, Kansas, and Georgia Tech. Now they play host to a Notre Dame squad looking to get back on track after a close loss to Ohio State in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. You can see it on Saturday at noon on CBS, and in this game I don't know if I'm smart to pick Kentucky in this game. I feel like they can't lose 4 in a row. I also thought they couldn't lose 3 in a row, and I knew they could probably lose 2 in a row because of the I think it was 2014. They had to go to the NIT because they just weren't that good. But I'm going to take Kentucky in this game. Kentucky has the talent to beat Notre Dame, and I think that after 3 straight losses, Coach Cal really gets under his players' skin. He knows how to coach, and he knows how to compile talent and get it to play together. So I will take Kentucky in this game on Saturday.
I've got Notre Dame. I was in Mike Bray's media availability yesterday, and he was saying how this game, he was really excited for it to be a chance for his players. He said that, when Rex Pfluger went down a few years ago, he started to throw a lot of freshmen. He said just threw them to the wolves, and it wasn't a great season. And he said last year, again, Notre Dame wasn't great, but they improved. And he said, we're kind of waiting on a big win that will give them, kind of like a confidence boost. And while this Kentucky team is struggling this year, when you beat Kentucky, it has to boost anyone's confidence. And I think Notre Dame has the players this year to do it. Dane Goodwin and Prentice Hub, one of the best backcourts in college basketball, or really in the ACC, but they are a good scoring duo in college basketball too, averaging well over 30 points a game so far in the season between those two combined. And I think that alone might get it done because Kentucky's scoring just hasn't impressed me, and they're going to need to score against Notre Dame.
A late addition to the pick segment due to a cancellation of the Providence game was set for this weekend. Memphis, they're winners of their last 3 and are looking to prove themselves against a Power 5 opponent, the first Power 5 opponent of the year. Auburn, meanwhile, after a few years of sky-high expectations, have struggled as of late and want to get back on track. Memphis favored in this one, and I am going to pick them because Auburn's 3-point shooting was their life source the last couple of years with guys like Bryce Brown and McCormick. But they don't have that this year, and Bruce Pearl wants to push the pace. He hasn't really been able to. And Memphis with Penny Hardaway, they just seem like a better team right now. I'm going to take Memphis to beat Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn obviously too, with the not being able to make the tournament this year, their self-imposed March Madness ban, I think that's going to have an impact on their whole season. And I see a Memphis team that you mentioned in an A-10 that loses UConn. Memphis is really, really good. They got the transfer from VTech, Landers Nolly. He's been a big part of their team so far. And I think this would just be a huge win for that conference and Memphis as well. When Memphis is good college basketball, I think it's good for college basketball in general because they're a team that has a lot of history. They're kind of like an America's team type of feel from that, high mid major, obviously with the D Rose run, that was fun to watch. And I think if Memphis can get this win, maybe they're headed back because Penny Hardaway, great coach. He's doing good things there.
He is doing great things there. We'll move on to our next matchup, and it's one that will usually decide that wins the national championship in college football. But when tip-off comes tomorrow at 7:30, it's all about what goes on the hardwood. It's Alabama and Clemson on ACC Network Extra. Clemson's had a couple of pretty good wins this year, at least in terms of traditional basketball powers in the Big Ten. Maryland, Purdue, usually pretty good squads. Alabama, meanwhile, is entering at 3-1. Their lone loss coming to Stanford, the team we mentioned earlier. Clemson favored in this one. Clemson's had Alabama's number when it comes to other sports. Will they have Alabama's number when it comes to basketball on Saturday?
They will. While Alabama does have a pretty good track record so far this year, I've been hard on the ACC, but I think Clemson's one of the deepest teams in the entire country. I think while they might not have a certain star to go to, they have good guy down low in Amir Sims. They've got CB Review, we interviewed John Newman earlier in the year. He's a guy that might not put up the most points, but they have guys on every single part of this team, whether they're coming off the bench, starting the game, that can contribute, putting up points, assists, rebounds, and I really like the makeup of that team. I don't know how far they'll go in the tournament because they kind of need, at least most teams need one guy that can take over. But as far as winning games like this, I think Clemson will.
Oh, our next game is one they used to call the Border War, and it's not who you think it might be when I mention one of these teams. It was definitely a war, whether it came to football or basketball or whatever they played. Fresh off their victory over Duke, number 6 Illinois is heading to Columbia to face off against an undefeated Missouri Tigers team, and it'll be their first real test of the new campaign. Illinois is favored, but not by as much as you would think, 58-41 percentage-wise. We'll get to see it play out on the SEC network. I can't see Illinois losing this game, but I can see them getting a little bit of a run for their money from a Missouri team that's feisty and will want to show out in a rivalry game.
Yeah, Missouri kind of flying under the radar a bit too, in that SEC that's a little bit weak this year. Missouri's been playing pretty well, and they're a team that could definitely skyrocket up those standings, but I just can't see Illinois losing this team. They have the best duo in college basketball by far in Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Cockburn, and I just don't think that a Missouri team will be able to keep up with that offense. I mean, Illinois can drop a 90 on just about anyone.
We'll move on to the Sunday action. That's right. The NFL and Matt's Washington football team don't always reign supreme. Number 19, Richmond, looks to continue its winning ways against 11th ranked West Virginia. Richmond, the darling of this year so far, beating Kentucky earlier in the season. And they didn't miss a beat after a COVID outbreak put their season on pause. They've beaten Wofford and Northern Iowa over the past week. The Mountaineers, though, aren't a pushover, having given Gonzaga a run for their money earlier this month. West Virginia favored, but Richmond's used to playing spoiler. Are they going to do it again, do another Power 5, though?
I don't think Richmond is this year's Dayton. I think that Richmond's a really, really good team. They've looked kind of iffy in their past 2 games, really struggled in the first half against a Northern Iowa team that is good, but missing their best player in A.J. Green. And West Virginia has played really well. I mean, they took Gonzaga. Obviously, Jalen Suggs was hurt a little bit in that one. West Virginia made their run while he was out, but nonetheless competed against a very good Zags team. So I've got West Virginia in this one, but Richmond will be there all season.
Moving on, the Big Ten Network has a solid matchup between 2 schools whose football teams are very disappointing this year. Basketball teams, not so much. They're doing pretty well to start the season off. Penn State 3-1, Michigan 5-0. Both teams have been on point offensively as of late and head into their conference slate off of wins. Michigan favored in this one, but I'm going to pick Michigan too because Michigan against Penn State in basketball, it's really no contest.
I'm going to go with Penn State in this one. I think, to me, it's going to be – I think it's a toss-up, man. I think Michigan at the end of the year might be better, but Penn State right now has just impressed me. I mean, I know, obviously, playing Seton Hall, I've gotten a pretty good look at them, but they had 40 points with almost a couple minutes to go until halftime. And one of their leading scorers from last year – I've said this on a podcast. I've wrote it down in an article, but I'm going to keep saying it. Miles Dredd was really projected to be probably the second leading scorer on this Penn State team this year. He's 7th right now. And I think that just shows the depth of this Penn State team, how good they can put the ball in the basket. But if Michigan wins, I will not be surprised at all. But I guess I'll put my check mark next to the Penn State Bucks.
And then finally, last game that we're going to pick today, and it's probably going to be the best game of the weekend. We both discussed that, and it comes out of the Big 12, Sunday afternoon on ESPN. 13th ranked Texas, 2nd ranked Baylor. It's a game that should live up to the billing. Texas obviously taking the Maui Invitational off a buzzer beater by Matt Coleman. Baylor, number 2 in the nation, not a perennial power, but slowly building its way to that. I'm going to take Baylor in this game. Texas did win the Maui Invitational, but they haven't been I don't think they played as well as Baylor, at least so far early this year. And Baylor has a more consistent starting lineup than Texas had last year. So we'll see what happens. It could be a toss-up, but I'm going to take Baylor.
Yeah, Scott Drew has something brewing in Waco, Texas. Baylor, definitely a very good team. I mean, most people would have them in their Final Four. I'm taking Texas in this one. Texas is my, I guess you could say, dark horse Final Four team. I don't know how much dark horse is when you're ranked 13th in the country, but I just think that as a trio of guards in Courtney Ramey, Andrew Jones, and Matt Coleman, I think those are perhaps the best guards in the country. If you're looking at, they're all guys that have been in the program for multiple times. Andrew Jones, a cancer survivor, so shout out to him. And Matt Coleman with that buzzer beater against USC, finally growing into the role that he needs to take as a clear leader and a go-to option. Baylor could obviously win this game. I'll go Texas. I like how our picks, though, we had some of the same. We had some different ones, so I really like this.
I do, too. That's all we got for you today, though, on the review. Resurrected, I guess, is what we can call it, at least for now. Next episode will come out sometime next week. Follow social media and CBB Review's website for that. Until then, though, that's Mat Mlodzinski. I'm Brendon Hodges. Happy to join the crew at CBB Review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, you have anything you want us to cover, quick tease for next time. We'll be talking about the 4 newest teams in Division I, and we'll try and debate which one's going to be the best out of those 4 this year, which will be very hard to do. So do your research, Matt. Maybe we'll have another writer on as well. We'll see. The possibilities are endless, but one thing we do know, we'll be back next week with episode 2 and 3. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.